Marry me. Think of it as a contract. Adrian Kingsley placed a velvet ring box on the diner table, then slid a thin legal file beside it. The diner was almost empty, which was probably why he had chosen it. Outside, cold autumn rain blurred the streets of downtown Chicago. Inside, the lights buzzed softly over chipped coffee mugs, half-empty sugar jars, and a waitress who had no idea her life was about to split in two. Clara Hayes stared at the man across from her. Perfect charcoal suit, wedding contract already prepared, no hesitation in his eyes. "I am sorry," she said slowly. "Did you just ask a complete stranger to marry you?" "Yes. You understand how insane that sounds?" "Yes, that made it worse." Adrian opened the file. "I only need this marriage to last 30 days. If I am not legally married before my father's estate review next Friday, I lose control of Kingsley Industries." Clara froze. Kingsley. Her fingers tightened around the coffee pot in her hand. There could not be many Kingsleys in Chicago with that kind of money. For 3 months she had been investigating missing employee pensions, suspicious charity transfers, and a boardroom cover-up tied to that exact family name. And now one of them was sitting in her section asking for a wife. "You picked the wrong waitress," she said. "I did not pick randomly." He slid a second page toward her. Clara's stomach dropped. It was a copy of one of her rejected articles. Her name was printed under the headline, "You are Clara Hayes," Adrian said. "You write better than most people testify in court. You are observant, calm under pressure, and almost invisible to the kind of people my family invites into a room. That is not a compliment. It is a reason." Her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. She glanced down before she could stop herself. Final notice. Rent due within 48 hours. Adrian saw only a flash of the screen, but it was enough. "I can pay you $75,000. Clara looked up. For 1 second the number stole the air from her lungs. Then pride brought it back. "I am not for sale. I never said you were." His voice stayed even. "I am offering a partnership. 30 days, 5 family events. You present yourself as my wife. No emotional involvement. No interference in each other's private lives. When the inheritance is secured, we walk away." Clara looked at the ring, then at the article, then at Adrian Kingsley. He believed a contract could save his future. She believed the truth could destroy his. Neither of them knew they were both wrong. If you enjoy emotional stories filled with hidden truths, impossible choices, and love that begins where trust should end, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments. Would you ever marry a stranger if it gave you the one chance you needed to uncover the truth? Now let us return to Clara Hayes. Clara should have walked away. Every instinct told her to leave the contract on the table, return to refilling coffee cups, and forget Adrian Kingsley had ever stepped into the diner. Instead, she remained exactly where she was. Her eyes drifted back to the rejected newspaper article lying between them. "You kept this?" she asked quietly. "I read it 3 times. You were the subject of that investigation. I was the target." There was a difference. Adrian folded his hands on the table. "My grandfather built Kingsley Industries from a single machine shop on the South Side. My father expanded it into one of the largest manufacturing companies in the Midwest." He paused. "When he died 6 months ago, he left one final condition." Clara listened without interrupting. "If I am not married before the estate review, the controlling shares transfer to the family trust." "And who controls the trust?" "My uncle." The answer came without emotion, but she noticed something behind his calm expression. Not fear, disappointment. "As far as I can tell," Adrian continued, "my father stopped trusting his own family long before he stopped trusting me." Clara studied him carefully. People lied every day. Politicians, executives, sources protecting themselves. She had built a career by noticing the smallest cracks in a person's story. Yet Adrian never avoided eye contact. He never rushed an answer. He simply spoke like a man carrying a burden he had grown tired of explaining. "So why me?" she finally asked. "You are not connected to my family's social circle. You have never accepted money from Kingsley Industries. And according to everything I have read," he glanced at her article once more, "you cannot be intimidated." She almost smiled. "That sounds more like hiring an investigator than finding a wife." "Perhaps I need both." For the first time that evening, they shared the smallest hint of genuine laughter. It disappeared almost as quickly as it came. Clara leaned back. "There is one problem. There are several. I am writing an investigation about your family. I know. You still want me to marry you. I want someone who values the truth more than appearances." The words lingered between them. Most wealthy men would have demanded loyalty. Adrian was asking for honesty. That alone made him different from every executive Clara had ever interviewed. Still, she refused to make this easy. "If I discover you are guilty of everything I have been investigating," she said firmly, "I will publish every word." Adrian nodded once. "If you discover I'm guilty, you should." Silence settled over the table. Outside, the rain continued falling against the windows. Finally, Adrian reached into the legal folder one last time. "This is the last page." Clara looked down. It was blank. "No additional conditions?" she asked. "No. If you decide to sign, you write the final rule." For the first time that night, Adrian Kingsley had given away control. Neither of them realized that the final rule Clara was about to write would eventually save both their lives. Clara picked up the pen but did not lower it to the paper. Instead, she looked directly at Adrian. "You said I could write the final rule. You can, and you will sign it without changing a single word, if it is reasonable." She smiled faintly. "You just added a condition." For a brief moment, Adrian almost laughed. Almost. She turned the blank page toward herself and began writing in careful, deliberate strokes. Rule number 5. Neither party may lie to the other, not by words, not by omission, not by allowing someone else to tell the lie for them. When she finished, she slid the page across the table. Adrian read every line. Then without hesitation, he signed his name. Clara stared at the signature. "That was fast." "If I cannot agree to honesty," Adrian replied, "there is no reason to ask for trust." She signed beneath him. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper felt strangely louder than the rain outside. The contract was complete. Neither of them smiled. This was not the beginning of a romance. It was the beginning of an agreement neither fully understood. Adrian closed the folder. "There is one more thing." He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small brass key on the table. "What is this, my guest house?" Clara immediately pushed it back. "I am not moving in tonight. I did not expect you to. It would look suspicious. My family already expects me to bring my future wife home this weekend." She sighed. "Your family moves quickly. They believe pressure reveals weakness." "And does it?" He looked at her for a long second. "We are about to find out." The waitress covering the overnight shift called Clara's name from across the diner. "Clara, your table needs coffee." Reality returned all at once. She stood, grabbed the coffee pot, and served 2 exhausted truck drivers sitting near the window. One of them thanked her with a tired smile. The ordinary moment felt strangely comforting. Only minutes earlier, she had been worrying about overdue rent. Now she had somehow become the fiancée of one of the wealthiest men in Chicago. As she returned, Adrian was standing beside the booth. "I will have my attorney prepare the public documents tomorrow." "No," he stopped. "No, if we are doing this," Clara said firmly, "I refuse to look like someone you bought." What do you suggest we meet again tomorrow? No lawyers, no assistants, no bodyguards. Just the two of us. I need to know the man before I pretend to love the husband. For the first time that evening, Adrian did not answer immediately. Then he nodded once. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I will pick the place. As he walked toward the exit, Clara noticed something unusual. He left the brass key behind. It was not an accident. It was a choice. And without realizing it, Adrian Kingsley had just handed Clara far more than access to a guest house. He had handed an investigative journalist the first piece of trust she had ever received from the man she had once believed was her biggest story. The next morning arrived far too quickly. At exactly 9 o'clock, Clara stood outside a small neighborhood cafe overlooking the Chicago River. She had expected Adrian to choose an exclusive private club. Instead, he walked toward her, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the corner shop. "You are early," he said. "So are you. I have never liked keeping people waiting." He handed her one of the cups. "No driver?" Clara asked. "No. No security. I wanted to meet as Adrian today." They walked along the river in comfortable silence. For 20 minutes, Adrian did not mention the contract, the inheritance, or the family waiting to judge her. Clara noticed small things instead. The scar along his right hand. The way he held the coffee cup carefully, as if too much pressure still caused pain. The way he listened before answering. For the first time since the contract had been signed, Adrian did not look like the intimidating chief executive officer whose name appeared in financial magazines. He looked like an ordinary man trying to solve an impossible problem. "I know you asked to meet the man before pretending to love the husband," he said. "Then why are we walking toward your house?" Adrian looked ahead. "Because you should see the battlefield before you meet the soldiers." Only then did Clara realize they had stopped in front of an elegant stone building. Kingsley House. The historic mansion stood behind iron gates surrounded by towering oak trees that had witnessed generations of family celebrations and betrayals. "My grandfather built this house in 1952, Adrian said quietly. "My family still believes nothing outside these gates matters. And you, I stopped believing that years ago." As they approached the entrance, the front door opened before Adrian reached it. An older gentleman wearing a dark suit greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome home, Mr. Kingsley." Then he looked at Clara. "And you must be Miss Hayes." She blinked. "You know my name." "I have worked for this family for 38 years. The man smiled politely. "I make it my business to know everyone who walks through this door." "This is Walter," Adrian explained. "He has managed this house since before I was born." Walter extended his hand. "It is a pleasure to finally meet the woman brave enough to say yes." Clara almost corrected him. She had not really said yes. Not yet. Instead, she simply smiled. The moment they stepped inside, she understood why Adrian had warned her. The entrance hall felt less like a home and more like a museum. Oil paintings of Kingsley ancestors covered the walls. Crystal chandeliers reflected the morning sunlight across polished marble floors. Every detail quietly announced the same message: power, legacy, expectation. Walter lowered his voice. "The family will arrive in less than 1 hour." Clara turned toward Adrian. "I thought this weekend was our first appearance." "It was." "What changed?" "My uncle changed it." Adrian handed her his phone. A message from Victor Kingsley filled the screen. "Bring your fiancée to lunch today. If she is truly part of this family, there is no reason to wait." Clara looked back at Adrian. "So, this is the first test?" "No." His expression grew more serious. "This is the first attack." For the first time since signing the contract, Clara realized she was not simply pretending to become Adrian's wife. She had just stepped onto a battlefield where every smile would hide a question, every compliment would conceal a trap, And one wrong answer could cost Adrian everything before the inheritance review had even begun. Walter led them through a long hallway before stopping outside an enormous dining room. The doors remained closed. Inside, voices drifted through the polished wood. Some were calm. Others sounded impatient. Walter straightened Adrian's jacket with the quiet care of someone who had watched him grow from a little boy into the man standing here today. "They are waiting," Walter said softly. Then he looked at Clara. "There is one piece of advice I have learned after 38 years in this house." She listened carefully. "The people who speak the loudest usually have the least power." Before Clara could respond, the dining room door swung open. Every conversation stopped. Nearly 20 pairs of eyes turned toward the couple. Adrian remained composed. Without saying a word, he gently placed his hand against the middle of Clara's back. It was a small gesture, natural, protective. Anyone watching would believe they were deeply in love. An elegant woman in her late 60s stood first. "Adrian," she said warmly, "you finally decided to surprise us." "This is Clara Hayes." Adrian's voice remained steady. "My fiancée." The woman smiled and embraced Clara. "I am Evelyn Kingsley. My husband always believed Adrian would only marry someone with courage. I can already see he was right." Before Clara could answer, another voice interrupted. "Or perhaps he simply ran out of time." The room instantly became quieter. Victor Kingsley slowly rose from the opposite end of the table. He looked remarkably like Adrian, the same sharp features, the same commanding presence. But there was no warmth in his eyes, only calculation. "So," Victor said, as he studied Clara from head to toe, "you are the woman willing to marry my nephew after knowing him for how long?" Clara met his gaze. "Long enough." A few relatives exchanged surprised glances. Victor smiled politely. A confident answer. "I appreciate honesty." "So do I," Clara replied. For the first time, Adrian glanced toward her. She was not intimidated. She was doing exactly what she had promised, telling the truth without revealing more than necessary. Lunch began. The conversation sounded ordinary: travel, business, family traditions. Yet Clara quickly realized every question carried a hidden purpose. Where had she gone to college? What neighborhood did she grow up in? How had she and Adrian met? Each answer was being measured, compared, judged. Halfway through the meal, Victor casually placed his fork on the table. "I understand you are a writer, Miss Hayes." Clara felt her heartbeat slow instead of quicken. "I am. What do you write?" "Mostly investigative journalism." Several people looked up. Victor's smile widened. "How fascinating. I have always believed journalists enjoy exposing powerful families." "They expose facts," Clara answered calmly. "Families decide for themselves whether those facts become scandals." Silence settled over the room. Even Walter, standing quietly near the wall, looked impressed. Victor held Clara's gaze for several long seconds. Then he laughed. A fair answer, but Clara noticed something the others missed. Victor's fingers tightened around his wineglass for only a moment. She had touched a nerve, and somewhere beneath the polished manners and expensive smiles, the first crack in the Kingsley family had just begun to appear. Lunch finally came to an end. One by one, members of the Kingsley family drifted into smaller conversations throughout the mansion. Victor disappeared into the library with 2 board members. Evelyn excused herself to prepare for an afternoon charity meeting. Only Walter seemed to notice the tension slowly leaving Clara's shoulders. "You handled yourself remarkably well," he said, with a gentle smile. "I was answering questions. In this house, Miss Hayes answering questions is a great deal more dangerous than asking them." Before Clara could respond, Adrian appeared beside her. "Would you walk with me?" She nodded. They stepped outside into the estate's private gardens, where rows of late autumn maples stretched toward a quiet lake behind the mansion. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence felt different now, less uncomfortable, more honest. Finally, Adrian stopped beside an old wooden bench overlooking the water. "I owe you an apology." Clara looked at him with surprise. "For what?" "I brought you into a situation that was far worse than I described. You knew your uncle would test me. I expected questions." His expression tightened. "I did not expect him to begin the war on the first day." Clara leaned against the back of the bench. "I can handle difficult interviews." This was not an interview. No, she smiled slightly. It felt more like surviving a courtroom. For the first time all afternoon, Adrian laughed. It was quiet, natural, not the controlled smile he wore during business meetings. The sound caught Clara completely off guard. She realized she had never imagined the man behind the title, only the title itself. After a moment, Adrian reached into his coat pocket. Clara noticed his right hand stiffen slightly before he removed an old photograph. "Old injury?" she asked. Adrian glanced at his hand. 6 years ago, a factory accident during an inspection. It healed, but it changed the way I write. He looked down at the photograph. "Some scars stay useful. They remind you what not to ignore." Then he handed her the old photograph. The edges had become worn with time. In the picture, a teenage Adrian stood beside an older man in work clothes instead of an expensive suit. "My grandfather," Adrian said. "He started this company with 12 employees." Clara studied the photograph. "He looks proud." "He was." Adrian's voice softened. "He believed a business existed to protect families, not enrich executives. What happened?" "My father expanded too quickly. The board became more powerful. The company became wealthier. And somehow," he looked across the lake, "we forgot why it existed in the first place." Clara remained quiet. Those words did not sound rehearsed. They sounded like regret, real regret. She reached into her shoulder bag and pulled out the folded copy of her investigation. "I have spent 3 months trying to prove your family destroyed people's lives." Adrian nodded. "I know. But today," she hesitated, "I did not meet the man I expected." He looked at her carefully. "And did I meet the journalist I expected?" She smiled. "Probably not." A cold breeze carried fallen leaves across the path between them. Neither noticed Walter watching quietly from a distant window. The old butler smiled to himself. For the first time in many years, he had seen Adrian speak to someone without hiding behind his position. Neither Adrian nor Clara realized it yet. But the strongest part of their agreement was no longer the contract they had signed. It was the trust they had started to earn. By early evening, the Kingsley estate looked peaceful again. Guests had gone home. The dining room had fallen silent. Only the staff remained quietly restoring the mansion to perfect order. Clara stood alone on the second-floor balcony, looking across the gardens, where the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the oak trees. She finally understood why powerful families fascinated journalists. The greatest secrets were never hidden behind locked doors. They were hidden behind perfect smiles. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Walter stopped beside her. "Mr. Kingsley has been called into an emergency board meeting." "Tonight?" Walter nodded. "It was arranged only 30 minutes ago." "By Victor?" "I believe so," Clara frowned. "Is that unusual?" Walter hesitated before answering. "In this family, nothing happens without a reason." As Adrian crossed the entrance hall downstairs, his phone continued vibrating with incoming messages. 3 board members had suddenly requested an emergency review of the inheritance process. Another demanded proof that his engagement was genuine. The timing was too perfect. Someone was accelerating the schedule. Adrian looked up toward the balcony. For just a second, his eyes met Clara's. Neither spoke, neither needed to. Then he left. Less than an hour later, Clara wandered through the mansion's west hallway, searching for the library Walter had mentioned earlier. She had no intention of snooping. She simply wanted somewhere quiet to organize her thoughts. As she turned the corner, two voices drifted through a partially opened door. Victor, and another man she did not recognize. The board is already questioning him. He will never survive next Friday. What about the woman? A brief silence followed. Victor answered calmly. She is more dangerous than I expected. Should we pay her? No. Find out what she is investigating. If she gets too close... His sentence stopped before the final words. But Clara did not need to hear them. The meaning was already clear. Her pulse quickened. Instinct told her to leave immediately. As she stepped backward, her shoulder brushed against a bronze umbrella stand. It rocked slightly. She caught it before it crashed onto the marble floor. The conversation inside stopped. "Did you hear something?" the unfamiliar man asked. Clara held her breath. Footsteps approached the doorway. Closer, closer. Just as the door began opening, Walter appeared at the opposite end of the hallway, carrying a tray of crystal glasses. "Gentlemen," he called politely, "Mrs. Kingsley asked me to remind you that your cars are waiting." The footsteps changed direction. The door closed again. Walter continued walking, as though nothing unusual had happened. Only after he reached Clara did he quietly whisper without looking at her. "You should never stand outside closed doors in this house." I was not trying to listen. "I know," he kept walking. "They simply assume everyone is." Walter paused near the stairway. "Miss Hayes," he said quietly, "every door in this house records who opens it. Every archive room, every executive file cabinet. Mr. Adrian never wanted to use those records against his own family." Clara looked at him. "But you kept them." Walter did not smile. "For 38 years I have kept many things this family hoped would disappear." Clara remained frozen for several seconds. Everything inside her wanted to tell Adrian what she had heard. Instead, she remembered the 5th rule she had written herself. Neither party may lie to the other. Not by words, not by omission. She had promised honesty. But before she could speak to Adrian, her own phone began ringing. The caller identification showed the editor who had rejected her investigation 3 weeks earlier. When Clara answered, the first words she heard made her blood run cold. "We have new evidence against Adrian Kingsley, and it is enough to destroy him forever." Clara ended the call, but did not lower her phone. She simply stood there in the dimly lit hallway, listening to her own heartbeat. Her editor had sounded excited, almost relieved. "Forensic accountants finally confirmed the documents," he had said. "If they are authentic, Adrian Kingsley authorized millions of dollars in illegal pension transfers. 3 months of unanswered questions. 3 months of chasing anonymous sources. Now someone had handed her exactly what every investigative journalist hoped to receive. Proof, or what appeared to be proof. She closed her eyes. Something felt wrong. Not because she wanted Adrian to be innocent, because the timing was too perfect. Victor had forced an early family gathering. The board had suddenly demanded an emergency review. Anonymous evidence appeared only hours later. None of it felt accidental. Clara slipped her phone into her bag and walked quickly toward Adrian's office. The door was slightly open. Inside, Adrian stood alone before a wall of framed photographs. He did not hear her enter. His jacket rested over a chair. His tie had been loosened. For the first time since they met, he looked exhausted. "They moved the estate review," he said quietly, without turning around. Clara stopped. "To when?" "Tomorrow afternoon." Her stomach tightened. That is impossible. It should be. He finally faced her. But 4 board members suddenly changed their votes. Clara remembered Victor's conversation in the hallway. Someone was accelerating everything. I need to tell you something. Adrian nodded. So do I. For a brief moment, both of them hesitated. Then Clara spoke first. My editor received financial records this evening. They appear to show your approval on illegal pension transfers. She carefully watched his face. Not fear, not panic, only confusion. I have never signed those documents. You are certain? I would remember stealing retirement savings from people who spent their lives building this company. His answer came without hesitation, without anger, only disappointment. Clara believed he believed every word he had just spoken. She reached into her bag and handed him her phone. The files have not been published yet. You should see them. Adrian studied the scanned documents. Then his eyes stopped on one signature. No. He whispered the word almost to himself. This signature is wrong. Clara stepped closer. What do you mean? My signature changed 6 years ago after a hand injury. He picked up a fountain pen from his desk. Without looking, he signed his name across a blank sheet of paper. Then he placed it beside the scanned document. The angle of the letter K, the pressure on the final stroke, the spacing. They copied my name. They did not copy how I write. Clara compared both signatures. Now that Adrian had pointed it out, the difference was unmistakable. Not obvious to ordinary readers, but impossible to ignore once seen. So someone forged everything, she whispered. Someone with access to internal company records. Silence filled the office. Both of them reached the same conclusion at exactly the same moment. Victor had not been trying to stop the inheritance review. He had been rushing it. If the forged documents became public before tomorrow's meeting, Adrian would lose the company before anyone had time to question the evidence. Clara slowly folded the papers. I can still publish this story. Adrian met her eyes. I know. She took a deep breath. But I would rather publish the truth. For the first time since signing the contract, neither of them was protecting the agreement. They were protecting each other. Clara took a photo of Adrian's fresh signature, then sent both signatures to a retired forensic document examiner who had helped her on an old corruption case. Adrian called Walter and asked for every access log connected to the executive archive. Walter answered with only one sentence. I was hoping you would finally ask. Neither Adrian nor Clara slept that night. And by sunrise, Victor Kingsley was certain he had already won. The next afternoon, every seat inside the Kingsley Industries boardroom was filled. Board members, family attorneys, financial advisors. And at the far end of the polished conference table stood Victor Kingsley, holding a folder thick enough to destroy a man's future. Adrian entered first. Clara walked beside him. Neither of them spoke. Neither needed to. Victor smiled as though the outcome had already been decided. Before we begin today's estate review, he announced, there is one matter the board deserves to see. He placed several documents in front of each director, the forged pension records. Within seconds, whispers spread across the room. One board member looked up in disbelief. Another slowly removed his glasses. Victor spoke with practiced confidence. These records prove Adrian Kingsley authorized the illegal diversion of employee pension funds. Under the terms of the estate agreement, such misconduct immediately disqualifies him from assuming control of the company. He turned toward Adrian. Do you deny these signatures? I do, Victor smiled. That is unfortunate. The evidence says otherwise. Before another word could be spoken, Clara stepped forward. I disagree. Every eye in the room shifted toward her. Victor's smile faded. You were not invited to address the board. I was invited to become part of this family. She placed 2 sheets of paper beside the forged documents. One contained Adrian's genuine signature, written only hours earlier. The other, displayed in large signature comparisons reviewed that morning by a retired forensic document examiner Clara had worked with before. It was not a final legal report, but it was enough to show the board what needed to be investigated before they destroyed an innocent man. "I am an investigative journalist," Clara said calmly. "My career depends on verifying evidence before publishing it." She pointed toward the signatures. "These documents are forged. The differences are small, but they are consistent. The pressure, the spacing, the angle of the final stroke. They were copied. They were never written by Adrian Kingsley." Silence settled across the boardroom. Then another voice broke it. "Walter." The elderly butler quietly approached the table, carrying a sealed envelope. "I believe this belongs to the board." Inside were security records from the executive archive, entry logs, video timestamps, electronic access reports. Together, they showed only one executive had entered the secure records room before the forged documents appeared. Victor Kingsley. The room erupted. Board members demanded explanations. Family attorneys requested an immediate investigation. Victor's confidence disappeared for the first time. "This proves nothing," he insisted. "It proves enough," the chairman replied. "You are suspended effective immediately." Victor looked toward Adrian, hoping for hesitation. He found none. Adrian simply watched in silence as security escorted his uncle from the room. The meeting continued for less than 15 minutes. When the final vote was counted, Adrian Kingsley officially became chairman and chief executive officer of Kingsley Industries. Not because he had defeated his family, because the truth had finally defeated the lies. Later that evening, Adrian and Clara returned to the quiet diner where everything had begun. The same corner booth, the same warm coffee, the same rain tapping gently against the windows. Adrian removed the contract from his briefcase. Without saying a word, he tore every page in half. Then he placed the wedding ring between them once again. Beside it, Clara placed the small brass key he had left behind on the first night. "I never used it," she said. Adrian looked at the key, then back at her. "Why not? Because I did not want access to your house. I wanted the truth about your life." Adrian smiled softly. "Then keep it now. Not as access to a guest house, as a key to a home we choose together." This time he said, "There is no contract, no inheritance, no deadline, only one question." He looked into her eyes. "Would you marry me because you know who I am?" Clara smiled as she remembered the 5th rule she had written on a blank page only days before. Neither party may lie to the other, not by words, not by omission. She reached across the table and slipped the ring onto her finger. "I already know who you are." And that is exactly why my answer is yes. They signed a contract to fool one powerful family. But they ended up telling each other the one thing neither of them expected: the truth. And in the end, the contract gave Adrian his inheritance. But honesty gave them something far greater: a future.